I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss, and Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency. We offer a ton of great free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed throughout your career. Before we get started, like I said, we will be taking questions at the end of today's webinar. You can leave them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll find it where you found the chat previously. You can leave questions as yourself or anonymously. Don't be afraid to ask whatever comes to mind. We're also recording today's webinar, and we will be sending it out in a follow-up email later today, along with some resources that Beth has provided for us. So be sure to be on the lookout for that as well. Here with me today is leadership expert Beth Caldwell. Beth is the author of more than 10 books on leadership, inspiration, and personal development. She's the founder and head instructor of Leadership Academy for Women, the former host of the popular web TV show Smart Leadership, and she currently hosts a motivational weekly broadcast called Monday Morning Mastermind. Beth spent 4 years teaching with the Steve Harvey Success Institute on the topics of leadership, time management, and personal success. She's received the Pittsburgh Magazine 40 Under 40 Award for being an innovative young leader and was recently honored with the Women of Courage Award. Thank you so much for being here today, Beth. I'll pass it over to you.
Samantha, thank you. You always do such a beautiful job at putting these together. And hello, everybody. I saw I have somebody there from Cleveland who also likes the Pittsburgh Steelers. So hello to you. We are going to talk today about how to deal with bullies at work. Now, I was here with you all almost a year ago, last May, right in the beginning of the pandemic, and we talked about conflict at work. And I've been an active member of Fairygodboss for over a year now, and two things that I've noticed. One, in that workshop that we did together last May, there were a lot of questions at the end. We really did run out of time. So I'm going to try to end a little earlier today so I could take your questions. If you were here with Samantha and I in May, let us know in the chats. Just say I was here in May. And since then, I've really paid attention into the chats, and I noticed that there are a lot of questions about bullying. And that's why I feel like this topic is very, very important. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I have some tips and some suggestions, some ideas for you. I'm going to try to finish this in about 35 or 40 minutes so that I can then take your questions. So write them down or put them in the chat. Samantha will be following those, keeping track of those to ask me. Okay, so my computer doesn't want to, there we go. So I want to give you an alert right now. When you learn some of the strategies that I'm going to teach you today, which work for bullying and criticism, but they also work for many other things in your life, you will have a renewed sense of confidence. And when you have a renewed sense of confidence, when you believe in yourself, you may be able to notice, you may notice that you'll begin to take new risks. You'll stretch outside of your comfort zone. You'll stop avoiding success. You'll embrace growth, accept new challenges, all the good things, right? Feeling proud of your accomplishments. And guess what? You will also inspire others to do the same. So I'm really glad that you are here today and that you are here live. As Samantha said, I am Beth Caldwell, and I have spent until 2018, I was on the road for 4 years teaching success topics just like this with the Steve Harvey Success Institute. I've also been very blessed. One of my books is called Get Paid What You're Worth, and I was able to be on stage with Susie Orman when that book came out in 2013. I've written 10 books. And I now work here in my hometown, my home office in my hometown of Pittsburgh, PA, as a speaker. You know, I wish that Zoom gave frequent flyer miles because I've done quite a bit of traveling this year on Zoom. So I work as a speaker and as a full-time coach. These are my last 3 most current books, and you can get them at any bookstore. I think we mostly have folks here from the United States, but my books are for sale in the Canada, United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. So workplace bullying is on the rise. Now, I don't know if the bullying is on the rise or if the reporting is on the rise. I'm not sure if we can ever know the difference. But the truth is that there are a lot of people who are upset at work, and there are a lot of people in the workplace who don't have the emotional intelligence to handle their challenges and conflicts in an emotionally intelligent adult way. And this is a problem, because when we spend a lot of time in the workplace, and it should be a place that gives us satisfaction and fulfillment, where we are able to do good work. And when it is instead a place of conflict and misery and anxiety, well, nobody wins in that situation. The employee doesn't do well, the company doesn't do well, and we lose people. We lose people from that in the workplace. So I'm going to give you 10 tips on how to handle these kind of situations. And when I say bullying, of course, I want to hear about some of the experiences that you've had. But what I've personally experienced and what I've coached and consulted on in the workplace are, snarky comments, criticism, undercutting, teasing, pranks, those sort of things that make another person feel embarrassed or feel ashamed or feel like they don't fit in. So that's the kind of bullying that I'm going to talk about today. And if you have other situations, we'll take those by questions. So my number one tip for you, as much as you can, is to remain professional. Oh, if we didn't have emotions, wouldn't that make things so much easier? But I love this. I don't love this picture. This picture actually creeps me out. But this is such an actual picture of how you feel when you're sitting at a table and everybody's looking at you and waiting for you to say something. So as a very confident, outspoken, creative, full of ideas person, I have sat at a number of tables where people have looked at me this way, because just like you, I make people uncomfortable. So smart women who have big ideas, who are a little bit different than everybody else, make people uncomfortable. So do smart men, but smart women do that a little bit more, okay? So when somebody says something snarky, horrible, critical, unbelievably shocking to you, the first tip that, if you can remember, is to stay professional. Now, if you don't remember and you become emotional, either sad or angry, that's okay. This is hard. Just prepare yourself so that the next time that you face this, you stay professional. And how I do that is when somebody says something awful, embarrassing, shocking, surprising to me, I have trained myself to say, wow, that's a really interesting comment. I wasn't expecting that. That is a filler comment that I can say, that I can speak while my mind is processing, like, did he really or did she really just say that to me? So sometimes, let's say when I was in my 20s or 30s, I might have had the reaction to say, excuse me, what did you say? Well, that doesn't help the situation get better at all when you tone something like that. So if you feel like, violently upset or like you're going to burst into tears, by all means, excuse yourself from the room. Okay. But if you, like me, having lots of practice at that, I can stuff that for a moment. I can stuff my feelings for a moment and feel them later when I'm alone. But if you need to, you leave the room. You don't have to react or respond to that person this minute or today. There have been plenty of conversations that I have facilitated a day, 5 days, a week after. And that conversation goes something like this. Hey, Jack, do you remember last week when we were in the conference room and you said this? I was thrown off at the time and I wasn't able to say something immediately, but that's not okay. We can't have that kind of talk in the workplace. We can't have that kind of behavior. That's not cool. And usually Jack is like, yeah, sorry, that was out of hand, whatever. So you can stay professional. If you can say something like that in the moment, awesome. If you can't, it's okay to say it later. So tip number one, stay professional. Tip number two is when you do respond, use a carefully worded response. Okay. And there are all kinds of classes and workshops and books written on how to say things to people without emotions. But some of the things that I shared with you that I like to say that work really well are, so for example, I had somebody who, when I worked as a social worker, who was very threatened and just didn't, any idea that I had, she wanted nothing to do with. And anytime that I would come up with the idea, but obviously I did eventually leave that situation, but any kind of idea that I came up with, she would find everything wrong with it. And there was a time that we were in a conference room and our mutual boss assigned us to the same project. And she immediately threw back from the table and said, that's not going to work. That is never going to work. She doesn't have she doesn't have this. She's not the right person for the job. And I said, excuse me, we'll just use the name Sandra. Excuse me, Sandra, it sounds to me like you're saying I'm not qualified for this project. Is that what you're saying? You don't feel that I'm qualified for this project? And it's really important to try not to have emotion when you say that kind of a thing. Because if you have emotion, it becomes confrontational. So two things, when you use a response, have it be as flat as you can and have no emotion at all. And the second thing, this was so hard for me, pause. Right? Just pause. Sandra, it sounds like you're saying you don't feel that I'm qualified to do this project. Did I hear that right? That pause is so powerful because it lets everybody else in the room go, ooh, right? Whatever. But it also lets her hear what you said. What we tend to do is say, Sandra, it sounds to me like you don't think I'm qualified. Is that true? Because the truth is, I have this degree and this certification. I have this many years. You just keep going on, and we don't get to make our point. So use carefully worded responses, and don't forget that very powerful pause. So powerful. Okay. Tip number 3 is outside or before or after you've had a confrontation or a conflict with a person would be to set boundaries. Now, Samantha is going to send you out a few links from me afterwards, and I have a link in there to an article that talks about boundaries that gives exact examples. I'm going to give you some that have worked for me in the past. So long ago in an early job, I had, probably just like you, some inappropriate behavior from men, some sexual harassment. And early in my career, I used to say things like, did I just bump into him? I must have moved into his space. Isn't that amazing how we will tend to blame things on ourselves, or take responsibility for things that really aren't ours? Even when somebody is saying something inappropriate to us, a lot of times I will hear women say, I must have started the day on the wrong foot. Like they take responsibility for that person's bad behavior. So early in my career, men would do inappropriate things, and I would think that I must have imagined that. That couldn't have happened. How did I get so close to his hand? Those are the things I would say. And then I got a little bit smarter as I got older. And I was at a job one time where I was working in an engineering firm, and somebody really crossed a line. And I would think by that time I was in my 30s, and I said, nah. That's all I said. Nuh-uh. He goes, all right, I'm sorry. That was inappropriate of me. That was inappropriate. And I didn't plan, that wasn't a carefully worded response. That was a reactive response. However, it worked. And then in the future, after I realized that I could set a boundary, I began to say things like, that's not something that we're going to have happen in these meetings. Those conversations aren't going to happen in those meetings. So I would begin to then set boundaries by saying them. And guess what? After a very short time, I never had to say anything again because people got to know what I would tolerate and what I wouldn't tolerate. So here are some examples of some better examples of boundaries instead of saying, nah, that's not going to happen. How about this? You can set a boundary by yourself, just to yourself. I will be at work before John, so I never have to ride in the elevator with him again. That could be a very first step. Not the best step, but in some cases, that's the best step. Another step would be, John, I will never ride in an elevator with you again. Or being in an HR department and saying, it needs to be set up and written that I will never be alone in an elevator with John. In fact, I never want to be on the same elevator as John again. That is setting a boundary, okay? So setting boundaries, they can be, the first boundary I ever set was with a bully who was my aunt years and years ago. When my children were little, she used to call me in the morning and just yap at me about all the things that I did wrong as a parent, all the terrible ways that I was a mom and how she was a better mom than me. And you know what? I set up a boundary that I wasn't going to answer the phone anymore before 8 a.m. I wasn't going to answer the phone in my house until my children and I had had breakfast and were dressed and were ready for the day. Because getting a phone call from a cranky person who's unhappy with their life could really set your day off on a bad note, and I didn't want that. And so that was my very first boundary. You know, it was about the same time as I set the boundary with the guy at work, and I began to learn, don't wait as long as I did to set them. So tip number 3 for you is set boundaries. And tip number 4 is just an awareness, and this is for you as an individual as well as for you as a leader. Remember that humans have emotions, and emotions will affect and put a filter on every single situation. Everybody brings their set of emotions to the situation. They put their own filter on it and they personalize it to them. So, for example, me being a woman raised in America at the time that I was, when somebody did something inappropriate to me physically, I would say, oh, I must be in the way. You know, my niece, who's 11 years old, she would never think that she was in the way. She wasn't raised in the same culture as me. She was raised in a girl power culture. She would be like, don't touch me, move out of my way. She has such a better sense of boundaries than we were taught. But everybody puts everything that happens through their own filter. This is a leadership skill, and it's something that you need to really get to master any kind of conflict, is to really be able to recognize this. And when you do, you can pull yourself out of the situation, and you can see that most conflicts, whether they're bullying or just plain bad behavior, usually these things stem from some kind of fear. Usually these kind of conflicts stem from some kind of fear, and that's that person's emotion. That's that person's defense mechanism. So when you come up with something that you think is a reasonable solution and people don't react in the way that you expect, it's because they have their own emotions, their own fears, and their own filters. Now, how can this help you? It can help you to eliminate the defensiveness or the victimness, thinking that everybody is against you, or thinking that there is no solution. This is an emotional intelligence tactic that we can say, I thought that was a great solution. I'm really surprised it didn't work. What I know it was a great solution. What could have been this problem? This is the internal thought process that you can, how would that have been a threat to Jack? How would that be a threat to Anne? Is there another way that I could approach this? So this is tip number 4, remembering and being aware of other people's emotions and other people's filters, okay? Tip number 5, I give this advice to everybody. If you are being bullied at work, and especially if you're being bullied at work, or you find yourself in a constant conflict at work, and you've gone to your supervisor and you've gone to HR, you've gone to directors, and nothing is being done, then sad to say, but chances are that your employer does not value a positive work environment. They don't value positive culture. And so it's up to you to seek a better position. I would like for you to seek a better position, leave that company, and let them know exactly why you have left. Most people don't do that. I've left positions because of bad bosses. I have left more than one position because of bad bosses. And when they asked me why I left, I made up something. Oh, I just really like this opportunity, or this is closer to home. I didn't tell the truth. And when we don't tell the truth, we can't initiate any sort of change. But I understand that, because these are very, very challenging situations. So if you haven't told the truth, don't be hard on yourself. But the next time you're faced with a difficult situation, tell the truth. And here's how that goes. The truth is, I don't feel safe here. The truth is, I felt attacked here many, many times. The truth is, this was a very frustrating and overwhelming and intimidating workplace environment. Now, that HR person that you're talking to, or that supervisor, director, they know. They absolutely know that. But if you tell them that you're leaving because you want a closer commute, then they don't have to deal with the problem. But if you tell them the truth is, I feel afraid here, I feel intimidated, I don't feel safe, now they really have to do something. So seek a better position. It's always better, it's always easier to find a job when you have a job. Okay. So look for one while you have one. And also, I want you to protect yourself, because if you are being bullied, I don't want for things at work to get so bad that you have to quit. And then you don't have a job. And then your problem is you're depressed and upset and anxious, and um, you've been through a trauma, you've been through an emotional trauma that you have to recover from, and you don't have a paycheck. We don't need to have multiple problems that we're facing. So begin to seek a better job as soon as you see that things are not improving or that you have no power to change them. And one thing that I do want to tell you is that when you are interviewing for a new job, be very aware of your experience and what you have learned. And if you are interviewing at a new company and a lot of things look good, sometimes when you have a job that you hate and you're looking at another job, it's just the fact that it's not the job you hate. And so you take it and you wind up back in the same relationship. Has anybody ever done that with a man? We do this in our personal relationships as well as our career relationships, right? We're just so bad, I got to get out. And then you wind up in the next situation and it's really no better. Okay. So when you're interviewing with a new position, ask them about positive workplace, ask them about negative workplace, whatever terminology that you are comfortable using, ask them how they deal with conflict. And if you get some kind of sense that this is the same situation that you're leaving, keep looking. It's really important that you learn from the situation and we don't keep repeating these mistakes, both in our personal relationships and our careers, right? Number 7 is also a difficult one. And by the way, these are 10 tips for you. You don't have to implement all 10 of these tips. Pick 1 or 2 for today. Save this recording. It will be on the Fairygodboss website. You can go back to it over and over again. And by the way, if you're dealing with conflict at work, you can go back and find my presentation from last May. It is still on the website. And if you ever run into people that need this help, you can send them to this recording. So you don't have to do all 10 strategies today. Pick 1 or 2 that you can implement today. And when you master those, come back to the recording and pick the next one. And letting go of grudges is pretty deep work. It takes a while to get to a place where you can forgive and forget and move on. But if you've ever done anything like forgive and forget and move on, you know that taking those thoughts and those grudges and that resentment and removing it from your heart really makes you a much happier person. And so what I like to tell my clients is, don't put the keys to your happiness in someone else's pockets. Understand that their behavior is a result of their life experiences, their thoughts, their emotions, their choices, and not yours. And so what I like to say is bless them and wish them the best, and you move on and they move on. And hopefully we all have improved somewhat from the experience. Letting go of grudge is really important. And here's one that I struggled with for years, and that is teach others how to treat you. I love the picture of this woman. So I do a lot of teaching of workshops. I teach publicity, I teach leadership, I teach branding, I teach how to write books. And this photo comes from a workshop that I taught on how to take a good professional photo. But I love this photo so much that I use it in a lot of my presentations, because isn't this woman the most confident looking woman you have ever seen? Could you imagine ever being a man and just, like grinding your pelvis up against her when you walk past her? Like, no, they would never do that. The energy there. Could you imagine just saying something to her like, "Oh, well, you're just pretty uppity, aren't you? You're just pretty big for your britches. I guess you have an assistant now. I guess you're too good." You would not say that to this woman. You just wouldn't, because she exudes confidence. Isn't that amazing? Think about the people in your life that you respect and admire. The people who you would never call at 7 in the morning or at 11 o'clock at night, because you consciously respect their boundaries. How did they do that? How did they set those boundaries with you? They taught others how to treat them. The same way, on the other hand, we can teach other people to treat us by having no boundaries, by saying, no, no, it's okay. It's okay that you call me early. No, 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 it's okay that you sent me an email at 9 p.m. No, 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 it's fine. I don't mind, really. While your family is like, Mom, we're watching a show here, right? So when we teach people how to treat us, and it goes both ways. Come into my space, take all of my energy, drain my energy, say whatever you want to me. We've taught them that it's okay to do that. We didn't know any better. We didn't know about boundaries. I didn't know about boundaries until I was in my early 30s. So learn about the boundaries, teach people how to treat you. Everybody will be a lot happier. Here's something that has absolutely nothing to do for most of the time about your career, and that is to discover your purpose. Sometimes your life purpose happens to coincide with your career, but most of the time it's something separate. So, and by the way, if you don't know anything, or if you've forgotten, because a lot of us who are very stressed and very tired and very busy at work have forgotten what our life purpose is. We have more than one purpose in life. We have more than one reason for being on this earth. Okay. So you have different purposes at different times in your life. So what is it that makes your soul happy? What is it that you would do if nobody paid you ever? What is it that you can do that can make the world a better place? And chances are that's your gift, and it's part of your purpose and reason for being here. And when we live a life in reactive mode, which many of us have been living for the past 12, 14 months, when we get into living in reactive mode, we get away from our purpose and we forget what really brings us joy and what really brings us happiness. So take some time, look at the paths ahead of you, and discover or rediscover your purpose. When you have a life that is filled with purpose, your career is a lot easier to take. Your workday, it's a lot easier to take. Okay. So think about that. When is the last time that you've done something that has really fed your soul? All of us. It's been an interesting year. Okay. And my last tip for you, I have noticed that a lot of women somehow have this idea or this notion that we should get a job and we should be in that job or that relationship or that neighborhood, whatever it is, forever. That is not the way life is meant to work. The goal isn't to be somewhere forever, including on this earth. It isn't to live forever. Your ultimate goal isn't to live forever, because you can't do that. But you can create something that will live forever. And so what we tend to do is go, I moved here to this neighborhood, or I took this job and darn it, I'm going to make it work. Maybe that's not where you're meant to be, or maybe you were only meant to be there for a very short time. And so here's what happens. If you're somewhere, a career, a relationship, a neighborhood, a church, a situation of any kind that you are not meant to be in, that your purpose is meant somewhere else, I have to tell you from personal experience, things will get uncomfortable for you. They will get more and more uncomfortable to you until you finally make a change. You know, sometimes people will, not during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, occasionally I would get a call from a client. She would say, or she or he would say, I got laid off. And I would say, congratulations. You've been trying to leave that company for 4 years, but you haven't got around to it. You know why? Because you weren't unhappy enough. So a lot of people live in this world in a situation that I call not miserable. And not miserable is the worst place to be, because when you're miserable, when things are intolerable, you're moving, you're making a change. But all of the time that led up to that, you just weren't miserable enough to do anything about it. And those were little messages to you. You're on the wrong path. You're on the right here. Going back to this one. you're off your path. That's what those messages are to you. You're off your path. Let's get back on the path. Let's get back on the path. And finally, you've ignored those messages for so long because you're so worried about what everybody else would think and what everybody else will say. And you ignore them. And then you get back on the path and you're like, wow, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was. So number 10, fulfill your legacy. Remember that the goal is to create something that will last forever. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in that position forever. And I put the hashtag on there, Beth told me, because that's a trend. If you ever want to get my advice, you can go onto the internet and type in hashtag Beth told me, whatever social media that you're on, and you will see a lot of those little Bethisms come up. So let me go back over those 10 tips and then I'll take your questions. Number 1, stay professional. If you feel like you're going to be emotional, either sad, upset, angry, excuse yourself until you can be composed and use a carefully worded response. One thing that I don't want you to do is ignore a bully or ignore a conflict, because when we ignore them, they grow, or they are tolerated. Set boundaries for yourself. Make decisions. If it has to be just between you and yourself, and then as you get more confidence, make your boundaries known to other people. Be aware of not only your emotions, but the emotions of other and how they filter what they say and the choices that they make. Seek a better position. It's always better to find a good job when you have a good job. Learn from the situation. Release grudges. Remember to teach others how to treat you. Do not beat yourself up for being too nice, too accommodating, too friendly, too helpful. Look, those are not things to be ashamed of, but just be aware that you don't have to let everybody treat you like a servant, and do a little bit better in the future. Remember to discover or rediscover your purpose, and please, please, please fulfill your legacy, because you know what? When you take these strategies, whether it's dealing with a bully or any other conflict in your life, and when you live well and when you make smart choices, you are modeling these smart choices for everybody around you. It doesn't matter what your title is. For all of the people in your life, men and women, children, coworkers, colleagues, community friends, they notice how you deal with conflict, and you model for them how to do it right themselves. So I want to know, what are you thinking? Let me pull my mouse back over here and let's see here. I want to know what you're thinking. And then I will just tell you that if you want more, this is my newest book called Women Lead. You can get this in all of the bookstores. You can get that in United States, Canada, Australia. You can get it online. You can connect with me on Facebook. Samantha mentioned my group on Facebook. It's called Monday Morning Mastermind with Beth Caldwell. I also have a group on LinkedIn called Shift with Beth Caldwell. So if you like this kind of motivation, let's stay connected. Also, I'm on Fairygodboss. I think it is a fantastic site for the career woman, for the woman who wants to be a leader. So if you're there, please connect with me there. If you're not there, why not get over there and get busy on those message boards. There are some really good ones there. And then this is my last tip that I want to leave you with. And that is, how do we sort of justify this? Knowing that there's some people that we work with, sometimes some people in our family. How do we sleep at night knowing that they don't like us? You know what? I used to lose a lot of sleep over people not liking me. And now I turn my fan on and go to sleep because we're not meant to be for everyone. So I would like to know what your thoughts are. I do see some questions. Samantha, do you want me to take the questions, or do you want to ask them yourself?
I can do that for you. Thank you so much, Beth. We had a ton of great questions come in so far, and I want to redirect everybody to use the Q&A to leave them. I know there were some coming through in the chat, but they're coming through pretty fast, so Q&A will be the best place for us to manage it. I also wanted to share my book. I've been reading it right now. I'm on
thank you.
Emotional resilience. I'm learning all about emotional resilience right now. It's great. So definitely check it out. I have it over here on my workstation. But let's jump in. We had a ton of questions come through. Christy asked, I could use some help dealing with pot stirs. I have one creating a toxic situation that is killing everyone. So this is probably a situation where you like your job, you like most of your coworkers, but there's that one person who just loves to stir the pot. How do you deal with an individual like that?
A pot stirrer, is that what she called them? A pot stirrer, a manipulative person. A person who likes, so one thing that I do, that is a form of bullying. Who was this question from?
This is from Christy.
Hey, Christy, that's so annoying. And we a lot of times have those in our families as well. Don't we have pot stirrers in our family? So I find that sometimes I don't know the situation of the person. Sometimes that person may not be aware. It could be a subconscious need. Going back to remembering that everybody has their own emotions around this. Maybe this comes from a person who hasn't gotten any attention in their family or was always competitive with their brothers and sisters. Who knows what makes them that way, right? But this is a boundary issue. This is a boundary that you set up, okay? And so a lot of times what I will do is I get called into companies a lot of times, and they're usually sort of like medium-sized companies. They're not super large. So it's more of a family type of atmosphere, and therefore nobody wants to be the person to say anything. And so I get called in to do that. And I'll usually say something like, I had one, I think this is more serious than a pot stirrer, but I had somebody that was prone to temper tantrums. Yeah, like a 50-year-old woman that was prone to temper tantrums. I mean, screaming, yelling, slamming. And I would watch when this happened, and everybody in the workplace would just disengage, like, oh, Shirley's on a rampage again. Let me just check my messages. Let me check my grocery list, whatever. And one day I just interrupted her. And this is how I did it. I said, hold on. Hold on one second. Just hold your thought before you say another word. Now, I surprised her. She had worked at that company for 13 years. And nobody had ever stopped her from having a tantrum before. They just let her ramble. Why? Because that's what their boss had taught them to do, because he didn't know how to handle it. Okay. And then I said to her, everybody here, just hold, just hold. And she looked at her boss like, are you going to let her talk to me? It was funny. He didn't make eye contact. Right. But I handled the situation, and I made kind of a joke about it. And then I took Shirley aside later with the attorney. We had a meeting and said, this is not going to happen anymore. This is abusive. So interrupting the situation, that's an extreme example. I have also done more mild examples, but like saying, wait, did you just say that to her? They get very embarrassed when I call them on the truth. And usually what happens is everybody around the room does this. Right? It's something that everybody else has really wanted to say, but they haven't had the courage to say it. So I would think of something that you could say, hey, by the way, have you ever thought of something really good to say to a bully or a jerk? Like at the moment that they say something to you? No, we think about it like days later, hours later, in the middle of the night. When that happens again, remember that and have a plan on how to respond. And I think people will thank you. Let me know if that helps.
Awesome. Another question here from an anonymous attendee. What do you do and how do you handle the situation if it's a client? Because that's definitely some different territory. You might not be able to handle it the same way that you would with a coworker.
That is a really tough situation. So I have my own business, so I can fire my own clients. And I would imagine that you don't. And so I do think that there's something that I like to teach my corporations, and that is called expectations and toleration. So I don't know how serious this client is, but you can set a boundary. If this person is being abusive to you, you can set the expectation with your boss, with your supervisor. I will not be talked to that way, even from a client. So it depends on how serious that is. It also could be a boundary between you and that person, right? It could be where if we go back to the slide where I showed you the woman that I say that I admire so much, do they speak that way to everybody or just certain people? And how can I have a little bit of a stronger presence so that doesn't happen anymore? Does that help? Not knowing the situation, that's a little tough. But you can absolutely set boundaries.
Yeah, it definitely is tough when you don't have that power to fire your own clients and things like that, when you're just put on with clients and you have to make it work in some way. So that's helpful. We had a bunch of the same or similar question come through, so I want to get to that next. They're asking, Julie, I see the first one she asked, what specific tips or recommendations do you have for handling the situation when the bully is your boss or a leader in your organization? And again, I've had that from a lot of people now talking about that power
Yeah.
imbalance and power dynamic that you might have to deal with.
So whether it's a man or a woman that has a power dynamic, it's a little slightly different. I hate to say this, but I actually think that the female bullies are much more sinister than the men bullies. I don't know if you all have experienced that, but that's definitely been my experience. It's a little bit more wicked and nasty sometimes when it comes from a female. But ultimately, it is the same. It is sticking up for yourself. It is setting boundaries, and it is being not afraid to leave. Not, and that's the same in any kind of bully situation. When it's whether it's a relationship or whether it's a career or whether it's a family member, it's not being afraid to end that relationship. Now, there are all kinds of different emotions and personality factors that can come into play with this sort of thing. There are some people, there are some men especially, who will bully or have bullying behavior because it's their subconscious way of checking what your limit is. So some people that will push and another person will be like, but this person over here, I can push and push and push and push. My gosh, I have to do a lot before I get her to cry. A lot of times that's very subconscious. So having your own presence and having your boundary to be very, very close to what you'll tolerate and what you won't tolerate. And I don't ever advocate behaving in the same way that they behave. So if they're a screamer or a yeller or somebody who picks on you, I don't expect you or I don't encourage you to do the same thing. Some people say give it right back to them because that's the language that they speak. I don't think that's helpful. So I think it's standing up for yourself, setting your own boundaries, and being willing to leave, because for many situations, the person isn't going to make any changes unless you leave, and oftentimes they still don't change. I know that's probably not the best answer, but it is the truth.
Lori here asks, what do you recommend for introverts who need a little extra courage to make that first step, taking a stand and responding with a carefully worded and professional response? I mean, these are definitely tough situations for everyone, but I can imagine if you're not an extrovert, it might even be, it's an added challenge.
Especially it's tough, I think, for introverts because it takes a moment to pull together your words. And a lot of times when you're thinking of your words, and if you don't speak right away, other people will speak over you because they think they're helping you. And that's really frustrating. And so for introverts and extroverts, anybody who feels bullied, this is a great tip. And that is to have a prepared response. See, a lot of times the reason we're so emotionally devastated is because of a surprise. So everybody here today in this room, I'm not sure how many of us there are here, 150 people here in this room. We are all people who are highly professional. We value our careers. We value our personal accomplishments. We do our best. That's the type of people who come to lunchtime workshops on self-improvement, right? That's who we are. And so when somebody acts the complete opposite of that, they're irresponsible, unprofessional, non-respectful, that's a surprise to us because we would never act that way. So introverts, especially, all of us are surprised. So we don't know what to say. That's how come when somebody says something to you, like even me as a strong, confident, highly extroverted woman, I've had people say things to me and my response has been like, I got nothing till tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll think of something good, right? And so for everybody, having a prepared response is really good. And so sometimes you might have to have 3 or 4 prepared responses. And don't beat yourself up if you don't know these in advance. Look, this is something that we were not taught before. Okay. And then secondly, is this takes some courage as an introvert. And that is to say, let me finish. I wasn't finished. I have something to say. Oh, that's painful to say. It's painful to say for an extrovert in a conflict situation. So I know how that feels for you a little bit. But standing up for yourself and saying, I didn't finish. You didn't let me finish. You keep talking. If I was a psychologist, that would be so wrong because I just blamed it. You're not supposed to say you, right? You're supposed to say, I didn't get a chance to finish. So let me correct myself. I didn't get a chance to finish. I would like the opportunity to finish, making it about you. Another thing is writing, making it in writing. Sometimes that's a little bit easier, if that helps.
Yeah, that's a great point. Something I've seen come up a few times now is, a lot of the tips are, try and find a new position, try and find a better environment. Unfortunately, not everybody has that ability to do that, especially right now during the pandemic. Financials can be really tight. And so you may just have to wait it out. And so I guess, what are some tips for people to make the situation better? And Christy put it a really interesting way. How do you get people to actually care about and invest in your boundaries? She gave the example of a coworker is saying curse words all the time, and she's asked them not to say that around her, but the coworker has totally disrespected her boundaries and does it anyway. So how do we get people to really care about our boundaries and create a better situation, at least for the time being?
That's very frustrating. So I don't know your situation. Is it possible? I'm assuming that you've already asked if it's possible to have your seat, your space moved to a different space. It is unfortunate that curse words have become very everyday and very tolerated, but that does not mean that you have to lower your standards. So what I want to first say is keep your standards high. You deserve good standards. Yes, it is really frustrating to look for another job. However, this is another pushback kind of a thing. So this person who has a low sense of self-discipline, in other words, they're not able to control their mouth. They haven't mastered being able to control what comes out of their mouth. Okay, that sounds like what we have here. And they also know that it irritates you. Now, there is some points that person knows that the curse word is coming out of their mouth, and they could be like, oh, sorry, I'm mad, and then the next time they can catch themselves, right before the curse word comes out of their mouth, or they could not care, or they could see, well, how much does this bother her? Let me push her this far. And then she goes, oh, wait, was I in your space? Let me move back. And they come up again. So it could be a combination of one of the two of those things, but setting the boundary of like, if this doesn't change, then I will need to blank. How far are you willing to go? Hey, that's a negotiation. We always have to decide in any negotiation, what is it that we're willing to give up? What is it that we're willing to do? So you have to make that decision for yourself. I did see something in the chat too about somebody who had somebody who sends an email about somebody and then copies other people on it. So inappropriate. This is the same thing. So if you're a coworker that sees somebody, watches somebody cursing and knowing that it irritates somebody, and maybe it irritates you, but just not as much. And, or if you see somebody sending an email that's inappropriate, somebody has to be the first person to speak up. And we simplify things so much. If we could just do these 3 words, tell the truth. The truth is, Jackie, that's not appropriate to copy all these people on an email. The truth is that if you have a problem with somebody's work, it happens this way. And you know what? A lot of times, like we'll talk about both the email thing and the cursing thing. Somewhere in this company is a mission statement, and somewhere in this company is sort of like an agreement of how everybody is going to behave at work. And people forget about that mission statement all the time, and they forget about the code of ethics, the code of conduct. You know what? If you pull out the code of conduct and you say, this is the kind of workplace that we have promised to have, and this is not happening, it makes it really easy. The decision to fire somebody or put somebody on promotion is very easy. And we didn't even have to have a complicated topic, because the truth is it's in the code of conduct. Oh, I'm getting worked up now.
I mean, that's definitely such a tough thing is bullying over email too, because you don't have that chance to, it's so much easier. It's the age of social media. It's so much easier to say something over an email when you're disguised versus saying it face to face. It's so much easier. And especially now when we're all on Zoom and we're all just doing messaging, we have our screens turned off, it gets really easy to say some things that you might honestly not have the guts to say in person. So definitely I see it heightened a lot. And I saw an example, actually, I don't remember who said this, but they said it at the beginning of the presentation in the chat. They had a manager who wasn't so great to them and was kind of vicious in these one-on-one meetings that they would have every day. And she requested that they bring HR in to every single one of these meetings. And they said, I'll continue to have them, but only if HR is present. HR said no. And so the meetings stopped and she stopped having to deal with that every single day. Is that a long-term fix? I'm not sure. I'm not in that situation, but I think that was a really great minor fix to what was a really serious problem for every single day.
That was you shocked me when you said HR wouldn't do it. I thought they made her still have the meeting. So good for you. That was setting a boundary.
Yeah.
Congratulations for you. Great example to show to other people. And let me tell you what you did there. When you said, I won't do this unless the HR is present, all of the people in HR became aware of that. The next person that came up and had a problem with that individual or another individual, HR said, all you have to do is expect to have HR in the meeting. You taught them a coping mechanism. What that is it's a boundary. It's also a coping mechanism, because what we've done here is we've let this guy off the hook and we've let HR off the hook. So it's not really perfect, but it has gotten you to the next level. So well done.
All right. And looks like we have a few more minutes for a few more questions. This one came in again from a ton of people. It's kind of a dual-sided question. So if you want to answer it two separate ways, that's fine. But Michaela here asks, if we're honest about why we are leaving an employer, will they or could they take revenge on us by giving a really bad reference to a future employer? So that's one side of it. And then the other side is answering the question when you're in the next interview of why you actually left your previous environment. A lot of people leave because of toxic workplaces, but how do you go about explaining that? Should you say that? Does it make you look like the problem? I know that's kind of a big question, so I'll let you decide how you want to answer that.
Let me take, so first of all, when you're leaving someplace and you tell them the truth, I know there are some pretty horrible situations, but for the most part, on an average conflict-filled workplace, what you are saying is not a surprise to anybody. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Some people are just more willing to tolerate it than others. Okay. Now, if you think that somebody could, it would be illegal for them to take revenge on you or to try to hurt you in a future position. If you feel like that's a potential situation, you need to get an attorney immediately. That's way beyond what would be normal in the workplace. And so you'd want to protect yourself with an attorney. Now, as far as going into a new position, it depends. I don't think that there's just one reason that anybody leaves a workplace. I don't think there's just one reason why any of us look for a new workplace. So I wouldn't lead, I would not lead in with, I'm getting bullied at work, because that could set up an alarm to the person who is interviewing you. But what are the positive reasons that you want to be in this workplace? And I'll tell you something else that I do in my coaching practice. We do not look back. A lot of people spend most of their life looking back and focusing on what happened. We are focusing forward. The reason I'm interested in working with your amazing company is I really admire the way you blank. What you have here is very appealing because of this. So let's stay positive focused. Now, if they go back and forth, I don't think that you should lie. But for example, don't take the victim route. You could say it has been a really challenging workplace. And frankly, one of the things that appealed to me about your company is that positive workplace environment is really important to you.
Yeah, I was on mute there. But yeah, I think that's exactly the right way to kind of flip that question. And I don't want to say avoid the truthful answer, but it's a little bit of an avoidance, because unfortunately, saying that you came from a toxic workplace does send out red flags more often than not. It's sad because it is so common. And yet when people are interviewing you, it kind of sets off alerts for them. So I think rephrasing that question of, oh, well, I'm looking for a fit that fits my values, and I really think your company offers me blah, 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 all of those great things is a really nice way to kind of flip the question and lead into the positives. And
Yeah.
you want to keep your interview really positive, and that's a great way. I think that's great advice, Beth.
In fact, instead of saying I need a positive workplace, you know, you're turning it around to like, oh, she might be high maintenance. What you can say is, I really value, I do my best work when I'm in a positive workplace. So then you're actually making it about them. Oh, we'll get good work out of her. So practice that a little if you have to, especially, my goodness, coming out of a bullying situation and a pandemic, you're exhausted. You've been through not one trauma, but two, maybe more this year. And so you're not at your best self. So practice this a little bit.
Perfect. And then I'm going to ask one more question that I saw come in from two anonymous attendees. They asked about, how do you handle situations where a boss or a manager takes to kind of bullying you in a way in front of your peers? So you're in a group meeting, in a team meeting or something like that, and they'll decide to call you out on something or another. How do you deal with a situation like that where you're really being put on the spot and it's not just you and your manager anymore, but there are other people involved?
Yeah. So first of all, if you experience that happening to somebody else, speak up. You know what that feels like. So the reason why when a boss calls you on the carpet in front of other people and humiliates you on top of criticizing you, who feels their best self then? Absolutely nobody. So you're not really in a place to speak up for yourself because you're hurt, surprised, embarrassed, confused, bewildered. Maybe they're not even saying the truth. Who even knows, right? So if you're in experience and you witness that, speak up. Have the courage to speak up and always say the truth. So the truth is, it feels like you two are having a conversation that should be private. That's not hostile. You don't have to say the truth is, but like you say to yourself, the truth here is this is your choices. We're not supposed to say you, right? Remember, I'm not a therapist here. I'm a life coach. You want to say this feels like it should be a private conversation, or this seems to have become a conversation that should continue in private. This seems to be making everyone in the room uncomfortable, and we've clearly crossed the line here. Okay. And so that's if you're a witness. Now, if you're the victim and you are a victim, yes, we can say, oh, he's having a bad day, or she got up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever. You may not have the wherewithal to pull a comment, a response out of you at that moment. But as soon as you can afterward, address that person privately. Okay. Without making excuses for them and without apologizing for them. You may need to get a coach or a therapist to help you to create this and do that. Empower yourself in that way. Okay. If you have the courage and the wherewithal to say something in the room, congratulations to you. And if it were me, what I would say would be see, here's the thing, you guys. I work for myself. So I can say whatever I want because I make my own paycheck. So, you have to temper this a little bit. But I would actually say to that person, if it were me, I would say something like, I feel attacked. I don't feel safe right now. It feels like to me the best thing for you to do is to go back to your office or maybe go home. This is completely inappropriate. That's me. That's how I would say it. My voice is even shaking imagining it. So I feel for you. But I think the most important thing that we can do here is have solidarity and stick up for other people when we see this happening. Look, if nobody ever tells the person it's wrong, they are going to keep doing it. And even if somebody quits and somebody else quits and somebody else quits and somebody else quits, they still might keep doing it because it hasn't caused them enough pain. Because frankly, people are willing to work in intolerable circumstances. And as long as that happens, as long as people are too afraid to hold other people accountable, this will happen. Look, we are very powerful influencers when we stick together. So it's really up to us to set the standard. We have companies all over the place right now that are all female led. They're positive workplaces, especially in the tech field. People are fleeing the tech field because they say it's toxic and they're starting their own new companies. That's one solution. Another solution is for us to fix what's broken, tell the truth and fix it, hold people accountable.
I think that's the perfect note to end on, that, stick up for other people and hopefully that will come back to help you as well. I saw one attendee talked about how someone stood up for them when they witnessed her being bullied by a boss, and it made the difference. So if you see it, speak up. And then if you're in that situation, taking it privately, trying to your best every day to stand up for yourself is really important. So I want to say thank you so much to Beth for your time and answering all of our questions. There were so many that came in. If you still have questions that were not answered, I'd encourage you to go connect with Beth on Fairygodboss. You can find her there, leave your question there, and she will be sure to answer it. Beth, do you have any final statements that you want to say before we close out here today?
Yes, I want to congratulate you all for showing up here today. I want to encourage you to stand up for yourself, stand up for other people. I'm seeing some things come through the chat. They're coming through very, very fast, so it's hard to keep up with them. But I want you to, if you're having a situation where you're so bullied that you're ill, you're going to the hospital, you're having health issues, it is time to bring in an attorney. You do have rights, so please do that. Connect with me on Fairygodboss. You can ask me questions through there. I'm also on LinkedIn. And if you have questions or you want to continue, I am happy to host another call at any time in the future, you guys. Thank you, Samantha, for everything you do for women at Fairygodboss. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. And we will send you the recording by the end of the day today. So be on the lookout for it. And with that, have a great rest of your week, everyone. We'll catch you
Bye,
at the next time.
everybody.
Bye.